Ethan Cole thought grief was loyalty. For 4 years, he wore his wedding ring like armor, raised his son alone, and kept every woman at arm's length, especially Vivian Brooks, the CEO who loved him in silence. But at her birthday dinner, one cruel question shattered his carefully built walls, forcing him to flee before his pain destroyed everyone watching. What happened next in that cemetery would change 3 lives forever and nearly end one of them. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The restaurant was too bright, too loud, and Ethan Cole was beginning to regret coming at all. He sat at the far end of a long table crowded with Vivian's colleagues and friends, nursing a beer he didn't want and watching his son, Oliver, demolish a plate of chicken tenders with the focused intensity only a 7-year-old could manage. The boy's hair stuck up in the back, despite Ethan's efforts with a wet comb earlier that evening, and there was already ketchup on his collar. Ethan made a mental note to change him before they got home. Around them, the birthday celebration roared on. Vivian Brooks sat at the head of the table in a dark green dress that made her look like something out of a magazine. Confident, successful, untouchable. 30 years old today. Her laugh cut through the noise every few minutes, bright and genuine, and Ethan found himself watching her more than he should have. He'd known Vivian for 6 years. Met her when she was still climbing the corporate ladder at some tech startup, back when his wife Sarah was still alive and the world made sense. Vivian had been Sarah's friend first, not close, but friendly enough. She'd come to the funeral, brought casseroles, checked in, and then she'd just stayed. Not in an intrusive way. Vivian didn't push. She'd show up every few weeks with takeout, sit on his porch, and talk about nothing important while Oliver played in the yard. She never asked how he was doing, never tried to fix him. She just existed beside his grief without demanding anything in return, and somehow that had mattered more than all the well-meaning condolences combined. Over the years, she'd become something he couldn't quite name. Not family. Not exactly a friend. Something more complicated than either. Something that made his chest tight whenever she smiled at his son. Ethan? He blinked. One of Vivian's coworkers, Marcus maybe, was leaning across the table, grinning with the loose enthusiasm of someone 3 drinks deep. Yeah? I was just saying, man, you're like the most mysterious dude here. Vivian talks about you all the time, but nobody knows your deal. Ethan took a slow sip of his beer. Not much of a deal to know. Come on, Marcus waved a hand. You're a contractor, right? Build shit with your hands. That's cool. Old school. Something like that. And you've got the kid. Marcus nodded toward Oliver, who was now attempting to balance a spoon on his nose. Single dad. That's rough, man. How long's it been since his mom... 4 years, Ethan said flatly. The table had gone quieter. Not silent, but enough that a few people were listening now, including Vivian, whose smile had tightened at the edges. Marcus didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. Damn, 4 years! So what, you seen anyone? I mean, you're a good-looking dude, you've got your shit together, there's gotta be women interested, right? Ethan set his beer down carefully. No? No, really? Not even casually? Not even casually. Marcus laughed, incredulous. Man, 4 years is a long time to be alone. You can't just... I mean, at some point you've got to move on, right? For the kid's sake, if nothing else. The words landed like a punch to the gut. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared at Marcus, who was still grinning like he'd said something profound instead of something that made Ethan want to flip the table. Marcus, Vivian's voice cut through the noise sharp and cold. That's enough. What? I'm just saying that... You're drunk. Stop talking. Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender, still smiling. All right, sorry, man. Didn't mean that... Ethan stood up. The chair scraped loud against the tile floor. Oliver looked up from his chicken, confused. Vivian's eyes went wide. Ethan, we're leaving, Ethan said quietly. His voice didn't shake, but his hands did. He shoved them into his pockets before anyone could see. Dad? Oliver's voice was small, uncertain. Come on, buddy, time to go. But I'm not done. Now, Oliver. The boy's face crumpled, but he climbed down from his chair without arguing. Ethan pulled 2 20s from his wallet and dropped them on the table, more than enough to cover their meals, and then turned toward the door. Ethan, wait. Vivian was on her feet now, weaving through the crowd toward him. Please, he didn't mean... I know. Ethan didn't look at her. Couldn't. If he looked at her, he'd fall apart right there in front of everyone. Happy birthday, Viv. Don't go like this. I have to. He took Oliver's hand and walked out. But the parking lot was cold. Ethan's breath came in short, sharp bursts as he fumbled with his keys. Oliver stood beside the truck, quiet now, picking at a loose thread on his jacket. Dad, are you mad at me? The question broke something inside Ethan's chest. He crouched down, eye level with his son, and pulled him into a tight hug. No, buddy, not even a little bit, I'm sorry. Then why did we leave? Because I needed some air. But Miss Vivian looked sad. Ethan closed his eyes. I know. Do you not like her anymore? The words stuck in Ethan's throat. He liked Vivian, that was the problem. He liked her too much. Liked the way she made Oliver laugh. Liked the way she remembered how he took his coffee. Liked the way she looked at him like he wasn't just a broken man carrying a dead woman's memory, and hating himself for it. I like her fine, Ethan said finally. Come on, let's get you home. He buckled Oliver into the back seat, climbed behind the wheel, and started the engine. The radio kicked on, some country song about heartbreak and highways, and Ethan turned it off immediately. They were halfway home when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. At a red light, he glanced at the screen. Vivian, please talk to me. Vivian, I'm sorry about Marcus. He's an idiot. Vivian, where are you? Ethan locked the phone and tossed it into the cup holder. Son? He didn't go home. Instead, he turned left at the intersection and drove the familiar route he'd driven 100 times before, through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, past the elementary school where Oliver would start second grade in the fall, and out toward the edge of town where the cemetery sat on a low hill surrounded by oak trees. Dad? Oliver's voice was sleepy now. Where are we going? Just need to make a stop, buddy. The boy didn't argue. He leaned his head against the window and closed his eyes. The cemetery gates were open. Ethan parked near the entrance and killed the engine. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring through the windshield at the rows of headstones stretching into the dark. He hadn't been here in 6 months. Used to come every week, then every month, then only on her birthday and their anniversary. And now he wasn't sure why he'd come at all. Stay in the truck, Ethan said softly. I'll be right back. Oliver murmured something incoherent, already half asleep. Ethan climbed out and walked. The grass was damp beneath his boots, the air sharp with the smell of rain. He moved on autopilot, counting rows, until he found the spot he could have found blindfolded. Sarah Jean Cole. Beloved wife, mother. 1989 to 2020. The headstone was simple. Gray granite, no flourishes. Sarah would have hated anything too fancy. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, and tried to remember what he used to say during these visits. Used to talk to her like she could hear him, about Oliver's report cards, about jobs he'd finished, about how much he missed her. But the words had dried up somewhere along the way, and now all he had was silence. I don't know what I'm doing, he said finally. The wind rustled through the trees. 4 years. You'd think I'd have it figured out by now. But I don't. I'm just tired, Sarah. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay. Tired of people looking at me like I'm some tragic case. Tired of... He stopped. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming up the path behind him. He didn't turn around, didn't have to. He'd know that walk anywhere. How'd you know I'd be here? Ethan asked. Vivian stopped a few feet away. Because you always come here when you're upset. I'm not upset. Ethan. He finally turned. She looked smaller out here, wrapped in a coat she must have grabbed on her way out of the restaurant. Her hair was windblown, her makeup slightly smudged, and she was shivering. You should get back to your party, Ethan said. The party's over. Because of me. Because Marcus is an asshole and everyone was uncomfortable. Ethan looked away. He wasn't wrong. Yes, he was. No, Viv, he wasn't. The words came out harsher than he meant them to. 4 years is a long time, and I've been stuck, I know that. I know Oliver deserves better, I know I can't just stop. Stop what? Stop punishing yourself. Vivian stepped closer, her voice trembling. You think I don't see it? You think I don't know what you're doing? You're so busy being loyal to someone who's gone that you won't let yourself live. That's not fair, isn't it? Her eyes were bright now, angry and wet. You won't date. You won't even consider it. You wear that ring like it's a shield, like if you take it off, you're betraying her, but she's not here, Ethan. She's not coming back, and torturing yourself doesn't change that. The words hit like a slap. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fists clenching in his pockets. You don't get to tell me how to grieve, he said, voice low. I'm not. I'm telling you how to live. Why do you even care? The question hung in the air between them, raw and exposed. Vivian's breath hitched. For a moment she looked like she might back down, retreat into the careful distance she usually kept. But then her expression hardened, and she took another step forward until she was close enough that Ethan could see the tears on her cheeks. Because I love you, she said. The world stopped. Ethan stared at her, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. What? I love you, her voice cracked. I've loved you for years, Ethan. I've sat on your porch and brought you dinner and watched you raise that beautiful boy. And I've been so careful not to push, not to ask for anything, because I knew you weren't ready. I told myself I could wait, that eventually you'd see me. But you don't, do you? You never will. Vivian, and the worst part? She laughed bitterly. The worst part is I can't even be mad at you for it. Because I know you're hurting, I know you loved her, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending it doesn't break my heart every time you look at me like I'm just some charity case you tolerate because I won't go away. That's not... Then what is it? She demanded. Tell me, Ethan, what am I to you? He opened his mouth, closed it. The answer was right there, burning in his chest, but he couldn't say it. Because if he said it, everything would change. If he said it, he'd have to admit that Marcus was right, that 4 years was too long, that he'd been hiding behind his grief because it was easier than risking his heart again. I don't know, he whispered. Vivian flinched like he'd struck her. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. She turned to leave, and that's when Ethan felt it. The panic, sharp and sudden, clawing up his throat. The thought of her walking away, of losing her, was unbearable. Worse than the grief, worse than the guilt. Wait. She stopped but didn't turn around. Ethan's voice shook. I'm scared, Viv. Of what? Of this. He gestured helplessly between them. Of you. Of what it means if I let myself feel something. Because if I do, and I lose you, you won't. You don't know that. Sarah was supposed to grow old with me. We were supposed to watch Oliver graduate, get married, have kids, and then one day she just wasn't there anymore. And I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save her. So yeah, I'm scared. I'm terrified. Because if I love you and something happens, Ethan, Vivian turned back, tears streaming down her face. You already love me. The words hit him like a freight train, and he realized she was right. He'd been in love with Vivian Brooks for longer than he wanted to admit. Maybe since the first time she'd shown up with Chinese food and hadn't flinched when Oliver spilled soy sauce all over her shoes. Maybe since the night she'd found him crying in his garage and sat with him until dawn without saying a word. Maybe since the moment he'd started looking forward to her visits, started noticing the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, started feeling like the house was too empty on the days she didn't come by. He loved her, and it made him feel like he was drowning. I can't, he said, voice breaking. I can't do this to her. To who? Sarah? Vivian's expression softened, sad and tender. Ethan, she would want you to be happy. She would want Oliver to have a family. Don't. His voice came out sharp, desperate. Don't tell me what she'd want. You didn't know her like I did. You're right, I didn't. But I know you. And I know you're not the kind of man who stops living because someone he loved is gone. That's not loyalty, Ethan. That's fear. He didn't have an answer for that. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, until, well, isn't this touching? Both of them froze. The voice came from somewhere behind Vivian, low and bitter and slurred with alcohol. Ethan's gaze snapped toward the sound, and his stomach dropped. A man stepped out from behind a large oak tree 20 feet away. Tall, broad-shouldered, expensive suit, rumpled like he'd been wearing it for 2 days straight. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot, and in his right hand he held a half-empty bottle of whiskey. Vivian went pale. Ryan. Ethan's muscles tensed. Who the hell is that? Her ex, Ryan said, taking a swig from the bottle. Though I prefer to think of myself as unfinished business. Vivian stepped in front of Ethan, her voice sharp. What are you doing here? What do you think? I came to see you. It's your birthday, after all. Ryan's smile was mean, ugly. Imagine my surprise when you left your own party to chase after some sad sack who's still hung up on his dead wife. Get out of here, Ryan. Now. Or what? He took a step closer, swaying slightly. You'll call the cops? Tell them I'm harassing you? Good luck with that. I haven't done anything wrong. Just having a drink in a public cemetery. Last I checked, that's not a crime. Ethan moved forward, positioning himself between Vivian and Ryan. She told you to leave. Ryan's gaze flicked to him, cold and assessing. And who the hell are you? The grieving widow? Look, buddy, I get it. You lost someone. That sucks. But you don't get to swoop in and steal my girlfriend just because you've got a sob story. I'm not your girlfriend, Vivian said, voice shaking with anger. We broke up 8 months ago. Because you were too busy playing house with this guy and his kid. Because you were controlling and paranoid and I couldn't breathe around you anymore. Ryan's face darkened. Paranoid. Right. Except I was right, wasn't I? You've been in love with him this whole time. Don't act like I'm crazy for seeing it. Ethan's fists clenched. You need to go. Now. Or what? You gonna hit me? Ryan laughed, sharp and bitter. Go ahead. I'd love to see you try. Ethan, don't. Vivian grabbed his arm. He's not worth it. But Ryan wasn't done. He stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could smell the whiskey on his breath, and his voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. You think you're better than me? You think because you've got this whole tragic hero thing going on, you deserve her? You don't. You're just a coward hiding behind a dead woman because you're too scared to actually live your life. The words detonated something inside Ethan. He lunged. It wasn't calculated, wasn't smart, just pure raw instinct. His fists connected with Ryan's jaw, and the man stumbled backward, the whiskey bottle slipping from his hand and shattering on the ground. Ethan, stop! Vivian's scream cut through the haze of rage, but Ryan was already recovering, and the look on his face was pure venom. He wiped blood from his lip and grinned. There it is, he said. The real you. Before Ethan could react, Ryan swung back. The punch caught him in the ribs, hard enough to knock the wind out of him. He staggered, and Ryan grabbed him by the collar, shoving him backward into Sarah's headstone. Ethan's back slammed into the granite, pain shooting up his spine. Ryan's fist came again, wild and desperate, and this time Ethan barely blocked it. Stop! Both of you! Stop! Vivian was trying to pull Ryan off, but he shook her off easily, and she stumbled, hitting the ground hard. That broke through Ethan's fury. He shoved Ryan back with everything he had, sending the man sprawling onto the grass. Then he dropped to his knees beside Vivian, hands shaking as he checked her for injuries. Are you okay? Viv, talk to me. I'm fine, she gasped, but her voice was trembling. I'm fine, but we need to go. Now. Ryan was already getting to his feet, and the look on his face made Ethan's blood run cold. This wasn't just anger. This was something worse. This isn't over, Ryan spat. You hear me? This isn't over. Ethan helped Vivian to her feet, keeping himself between her and Ryan, and started backing toward the parking lot. His heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins, and all he could think was, get her out of here, get her safe, get Oliver, and go. They made it to the truck. Ethan practically shoved Vivian into the passenger seat, then climbed behind the wheel and locked the doors. Oliver was still asleep in the back, oblivious to everything. Drive, Vivian whispered. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He gunned the engine and tore out of the parking lot, gravel spraying behind them. In the rearview mirror, he saw Ryan standing in the middle of the road, silhouetted against the cemetery gates, watching them leave. What the hell was that? Ethan's voice was rough, shaking. Vivian didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. Vivian. He's been following me, she said quietly. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. What? For weeks, maybe longer. I thought I was imagining it at first, but then I started seeing his car outside my office, outside my apartment. He'd call me from blocked numbers and just breathe. I blocked him everywhere, but he keeps finding ways to contact me. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to make it your problem. It's my problem now. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw real fear in her eyes. Ethan, he's not going to stop. You hit him. He's going to come after you, after Oliver. The words sent ice through Ethan's veins. He glanced in the rearview mirror at his son, still sleeping peacefully, unaware that their lives had just been turned upside down. Then we deal with it, Ethan said, voice hard. Together. Vivian didn't answer, but she reached over and took his hand, and for the first time in 4 years, Ethan didn't pull away. The drive back to Ethan's house took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Vivian sat beside him in silence, staring out the window like she was watching for something, or someone, to appear in the dark. Every few seconds, Ethan checked the rear-view mirror. Empty road, no headlights following them. But that didn't mean Ryan wasn't out there. You should have told me sooner, Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. Vivian didn't look at him. Would it have changed anything? I could have done something. Like what? Beat him up in a cemetery? Her voice was flat, exhausted. That worked out great. Ethan flinched. She wasn't wrong. He'd lost control back there, let his anger take over, and now they were in deeper than before. Ryan had seen him snap, had seen exactly what buttons to push. I'm sorry, Ethan said quietly. Don't be. He deserved it. Vivian finally turned to look at him, and her expression softened. But you can't do that again. He's looking for a reason to make you the bad guy. Don't give him one. He threatened you. He's been threatening me for months. Tonight was just the first time he did it in front of someone else. The words made Ethan's chest tighten. Why didn't you go to the police? I did. Vivian's laugh was bitter. 3 weeks ago, filed a report. They said unless he actually does something, breaks into my apartment, physically hurts me, there's not much they can do. Apparently showing up in public places and making phone calls doesn't qualify as stalking unless there's a clear pattern of escalation. That's insane. That's the law. Ethan pulled into his driveway and killed the engine. The house was dark except for the porch light he'd left on before they left for dinner. It looked smaller than usual, more vulnerable. He glanced back at Oliver, still asleep in his booster seat, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. Come inside, Ethan said. Just for tonight. I don't want you going home alone. Vivian hesitated. Ethan, please, she nodded. He carried Oliver into the house, the boy barely stirring as Ethan laid him down on his bed and pulled off his shoes. Ketchup-stained shirt and all. He'd deal with it in the morning. Right now, all that mattered was that his son was safe, asleep, unaware of the danger circling their lives. When Ethan came back downstairs, Vivian was standing in the kitchen, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. She'd taken off her coat, and in the dim light she looked smaller, more fragile than he'd ever seen her. You want coffee? Ethan asked, already moving toward the pot. I want a drink. He paused. I don't keep much in the house. Whatever you've got. Sure, you've... Ethan opened the cabinet above the fridge and pulled down a bottle of whiskey. Cheap stuff he'd bought 2 years ago and barely touched. He poured 2 glasses, no ice, and handed one to Vivian. She drank half of it in one swallow, grimaced, and set the glass down hard on the counter. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For dragging you into this, for putting Oliver at risk, for... Her voice cracked. For tonight. All of it. Ethan set his glass down and stepped closer. You didn't drag me into anything. I made my own choices. You hit him because of me. I hit him because he put his hands on you. He didn't. He shoved you, Viv. You hit the ground. That's putting hands on you. She looked away, blinking hard. I've handled worse from him. The admission hung in the air like a punch Ethan hadn't seen coming. What does that mean? His voice was low, dangerous. It means Ryan isn't just possessive. He's cruel. When we were together, he'd... She stopped, swallowed hard. He'd find ways to make me feel small, like I was nothing without him. And when I finally worked up the courage to leave, he made it very clear that he didn't consider us over, that he'd wait as long as it took for me to come to my senses. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Did he ever hurt you? Physically? Not like you're thinking. He never hit me, but he'd grab my arm too hard, slam doors, break things, just enough to scare me without leaving marks. Jesus, Vivian. I know. She laughed weakly. I know. I should have seen the signs earlier, should have gotten out sooner, but he was charming at first, successful, confident, and I thought maybe that was what I needed, someone who had their life together, someone who wasn't afraid to take charge. That's not taking charge, that's control. I know that now. She picked up her glass again, stared into it. I think part of the reason I stayed away from serious relationships after him was because I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. Like, if I could miss all those red flags with Ryan, how could I trust myself to pick someone decent? Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just stood there, watching her, wishing he could take back the last 4 years and do things differently, wishing he'd seen what was right in front of him instead of hiding behind grief and fear. You didn't miss anything, he said finally. Ryan hid who he was until you were too invested to leave easily. That's what guys like him do. It's not your fault. Vivian looked at him, her eyes shining. You really believe that? Yeah, I do. She set the glass down and closed the distance between them in 2 steps. Before Ethan could react, she wrapped her arms around him and buried her face in his chest. He froze for a second, unsure, and then his arms came up around her, holding her tight. They stood like that for a long time, neither of them speaking. Ethan could feel her heart beating against his ribs, could smell the faint scent of her perfume mixed with the whiskey on her breath. And for the first time in years, he felt something other than grief. He felt alive. I meant what I said, Vivian whispered against his shirt. At the cemetery. I love you, Ethan. I've loved you for so long, I don't even remember when it started. Ethan's throat tightened. Viv, you don't have to say it back. I'm not asking you to. I just need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens with Ryan, whatever happens with us, I'm here. As long as you'll let me be. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red from crying, and she'd never looked more beautiful. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to let someone in again. I don't know if I'm even capable of it. Then we'll figure it out together. What if I screw it up? Then we'll figure that out too. Ethan stared at her, searching her face for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she didn't mean it. But all he saw was certainty. Stubborn, terrifying certainty. I'm a mess, he said. I know. I've got a kid, a mortgage, a job that barely pays the bills. I know. And I'm still wearing my wedding ring. Vivian's gaze dropped to his left hand, where the gold band sat like it always had. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched it with her fingertip. You don't have to take it off, she said softly. Not for me. Not until you're ready. Something broke open inside Ethan's chest. He kissed her. It wasn't smooth or romantic or anything like the movies. It was desperate and messy and tasted like whiskey and salt from her tears. But it was real. More real than anything he'd felt in 4 years. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. I'm scared, Ethan said. Me too. But I want this. I want you. Vivian smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her all night. Good, because you're stuck with me now. They stood there in the kitchen, foreheads pressed together, and for a moment, everything else fell away. Ryan didn't exist. The past didn't exist. It was just the two of them, trying to figure out how to build something new from the wreckage of everything that had come before. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. They both jumped. He pulled it out of his pocket, and his stomach dropped when he saw the notification. Unknown number. Cute house. Your kid's got a nice room. 2nd floor, right side, dinosaur curtains. Real homey. Vivian read the message over his shoulder and went pale. Oh my God. Ethan was already moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into Oliver's room, heart pounding, half expecting to find the window open or the bed empty. But Oliver was still there, curled up under his blankets, breathing softly. Ethan crossed to the window and looked out. The street was empty, no cars, no movement. But someone had been close enough to see into this room, close enough to know which window belonged to his son. "Ethan." Vivian was in the doorway, her phone pressed to her ear. "I'm calling the police." He didn't argue. The next 2 hours were a blur. 2 uniformed officers showed up, took their statements, photographed the text message, and walked the perimeter of the house looking for signs of forced entry or surveillance equipment. They found nothing. Ryan had been smart enough not to leave evidence. "We'll increase patrols in the area," one of the officers said, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes. "And we'll add this to the existing report Ms. Brooks filed. But unless he makes an overt threat or attempts to enter the property, our hands are tied." "He threatened my kid," Ethan said, voice tight. "He implied he could see your kid. That's not the same thing legally." "That's insane." The officer sighed. "I know, but that's how it works. My advice? Get a restraining order. Document everything. And if he shows up here, call us immediately. Don't engage with him. Don't give him a reason to claim self-defense if things escalate." After they left, Ethan stood in the living room, feeling useless and furious, and more scared than he'd been since the night Sarah died. Vivian sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful, should have seen him following me." "This is not your fault. This is on him. He's doing this because of me. Because I left him. Because I—" She looked up, her eyes wet. "Because I fell in love with you." Ethan sat down beside her. "Then I guess we're both in it now. What are we going to do?" "I don't know, but we'll figure it out." The words sounded hollow even as he said them, because the truth was, Ethan had no idea what to do. He couldn't fight Ryan legally, couldn't make the police take the threat seriously, and he couldn't risk Oliver getting caught in the crossfire of whatever sick game Ryan was playing. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt completely out of control. Vivian stayed the night. Ethan gave her his bed and slept on the couch with a baseball bat propped against the armrest, just in case. He didn't sleep much. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside had him on edge. At some point, he must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and Oliver was standing in front of him, holding his stuffed triceratops and looking confused. "Dad, why are you sleeping on the couch?" Ethan sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Just fell asleep watching TV, buddy." "Is Miss Vivian still here?" "Yeah, she stayed over." Oliver's face lit up. "Is she making pancakes?" "I don't know. Why don't you go check?" The boy ran off toward the kitchen, and Ethan heard Vivian's surprised laugh a moment later. He stood, stretched, and followed. Vivian was standing at the stove in one of Ethan's old t-shirts and her dress from last night, flipping what looked like very lopsided pancakes. Oliver was perched on a stool at the counter, chattering about dinosaurs. "These are going to be terrible," Vivian said when she saw Ethan. "Fair warning. Can't be worse than mine. Want to bet?" Despite everything, Ethan smiled. It felt strange, wrong even, to feel anything close to normal after the night they'd had. But watching Vivian try to keep a pancake from burning while Oliver explained the difference between a brachiosaurus and an apatosaurus, it felt like something worth protecting. They ate breakfast together. The pancakes were, in fact, terrible, but Oliver didn't seem to care. He drowned them in syrup and declared them the best he'd ever had, which made Vivian laugh so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. Afterward, Ethan sent Oliver upstairs to get dressed for the day, and the lightness in the room evaporated immediately. "I need to go home," Vivian said quietly. "Change clothes. Check my apartment. I've got meetings this afternoon." "You're not going alone." "Ethan, I'm serious. I'll follow you over, wait while you get your stuff, and then you're coming back here." "I can't just move in with you." "Why not?" "Because—" She stopped, searching for an argument. "Because we just started this. Because Oliver needs time to adjust. Because Ryan knows where you live and he's not going to stop." Vivian went quiet. "You're staying here," Ethan said firmly. "At least until we figure out what to do about him. I've got a guest room. Oliver loves having you around, and I'll sleep better knowing you're not alone." "What about your neighbors? What are they going to think?" "I don't care what they think." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but just until this blows over." "Deal." They drove to her apartment in separate cars, Ethan following close behind, scanning every vehicle they passed for any sign of Ryan. Vivian lived in a modern complex on the north side of town, all glass and steel and too expensive rent. Ethan had only been here once before, months ago, when she'd needed help moving a couch. Inside, the apartment was neat and impersonal, like a hotel room someone had lived in but never really settled into. Vivian moved quickly, throwing clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag while Ethan stood by the door, keeping watch. "This is surreal," she said, zipping the bag closed. "I feel like I'm fleeing a crime scene." "You kind of are." She looked at him, and her expression was somewhere between terrified and exhausted. "How did this become my life?" "I don't know, but we're going to fix it." "You keep saying that. But what if we can't?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that. They were halfway to the door when Vivian's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and froze. "It's him." "Don't answer. What if he says something we can use against him?" "Viv." She answered it anyway, putting it on speaker. "Hey, baby." Ryan's voice was smooth, almost cheerful. "Did you sleep well?" Vivian's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "Just checking in. Making sure you're okay after last night. That was pretty intense, huh?" "You need to leave me alone, Ryan. I'm not doing anything wrong. Just calling my ex-girlfriend to see how she's doing. That's not a crime." "Stalking is." Ryan laughed. "Stalking? Come on. I've been keeping my distance. Haven't come within 100 feet of you. Haven't sent any threatening messages. I'm just concerned." "You're making some bad decisions, Viv. That guy you're with, he's a mess. Broke. Emotionally unstable. Violent. I mean, he literally assaulted me last night." "You shoved me first." "Did I? I don't remember it that way. And I'm pretty sure a judge won't either." Ethan stepped forward, his voice cold. "This is harassment. We're documenting everything." "Ethan," Ryan's tone brightened mockingly. "Good to hear your voice, buddy. How's the kid? Sleep okay? I hope he didn't have nightmares or anything." Ethan's fists clenched. "Stay away from my son." "Relax. I'm just making conversation. You know, it's funny. People always talk about how important it is to keep kids safe. You never really think about how easy it is for something bad to happen, do you? One unlocked door, one moment of distraction. Kids are so vulnerable." Vivian's face went white. "Ryan, stop. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just stating facts. Anyway, I should let you go. Sounds like you've got a busy day ahead. Moving in with your new boyfriend already? That's fast, real classy." The line went dead. Vivian lowered the phone, her hand shaking. "He was watching us. He saw me pack. Or he's guessing. Either way, we need to go. Now." They left the apartment and drove straight back to Ethan's house. The whole way, Ethan's mind raced. Ryan was escalating. The phone call wasn't just harassment. It was a warning, a promise that he could get to them whenever he wanted. When they got back, Ethan made Vivian promise not to leave the house without him. Then he called his boss and told him he needed a few days off. Family emergency. His boss wasn't thrilled, but he didn't argue. The rest of the day passed in tense, uncomfortable silence. Vivian worked from Ethan's kitchen table, laptop open, trying to keep up with emails and meetings while Ethan paced the house like a caged animal. Oliver seemed to sense something was wrong because he stayed quieter than usual, playing with his toys in the living room without asking for attention. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Ethan and Vivian sat on the back porch with beers they weren't really drinking. "I hate this," Vivian said. "I hate feeling helpless." "You're not helpless." "Then what am I? Because right now it feels like I'm just waiting for him to do something worse." Ethan didn't have a good answer, so he reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "We'll get through this," he said. "You don't know that." "No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway." Vivian looked at him, and despite everything, she smiled. "When did you become an optimist?" "About 5 minutes ago." She laughed, soft and tired, and leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until the stars came out, holding on to each other like it was the only thing keeping them both from falling apart. 3 days passed. Ryan didn't call again, didn't text, didn't show up. Should have been a relief, but instead it felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ethan started looking over his shoulder everywhere he went. Started checking the locks on the doors twice before bed. Started keeping the baseball bat closer than he probably should have. Vivian tried to keep working, but her focus was shot. She'd stare at her laptop for hours without getting anything done, jumping every time her phone buzzed. Oliver asked twice why Miss Vivian was staying with them. and Ethan didn't know what to say. Eventually, he settled on, "She's helping us out for a little while," which seemed to satisfy the boy. On the fourth day, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello?" Silence. Then, faintly, he heard breathing. "Ryan, I swear to God—" The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, his heart pounding. It was starting again. That night, he barely slept. Every sound had him on edge. Every shadow outside the window looked like a person. At 2 a.m, he got up and checked on Oliver for the third time. The boy was fine, snoring softly, one arm flung over the side of the bed. Ethan stood in the doorway watching him and felt a surge of protective fury so strong it almost knocked him over. He'd lost Sarah. He wouldn't lose his son. And he wouldn't lose Vivian, whatever it took, whatever he had to do. He'd keep them safe, even if it meant becoming the kind of man he'd never wanted to be. By the end of the first week, the silence from Ryan felt more dangerous than any threat he could have made. Ethan stood at the kitchen sink washing breakfast dishes while Vivian sat at the table with her laptop, pretending to work. Oliver was in the living room building something elaborate out of blocks, narrating an entire story to himself about dragons and knights. The scene should have been peaceful, domestic, normal. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced out the window for the 100th time that morning. The street was empty, except for Mrs. Patterson walking her ancient terrier in a delivery truck idling 3 houses down. Nothing suspicious, nothing out of place. "You're doing it again," Vivian said without looking up from her screen. "Doing what?" "Checking the window every 30 seconds. Ethan turned off the water and dried his hands. "Can you blame me?" "No, but you're going to give yourself a heart attack. Better than the alternative." Vivian closed her laptop and rubbed her eyes. She looked exhausted. They both did. Sleep had become something that happened in 2-hour increments, interrupted by every creak of the house settling or branch scraping against a window. "Maybe we're overreacting," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe he's moved on." "You don't believe that?" "No, but I'm tired of being scared." Ethan crossed to the table and sat down across from her. "We could leave. Take Oliver and go somewhere for a while. Rent a place out of state until Ryan loses interest." "Running isn't a solution. He'll just wait us out." "Then what do you want to do?" Vivian was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "I want to live my life. I want to go to work without looking over my shoulder. I want to take Oliver to the park. I want to sleep in your bed instead of jumping at shadows in the guest room." The last part made Ethan's chest tighten. They hadn't talked about that, about the fact that despite everything they'd admitted to each other, they were still sleeping in separate rooms. Part of it was practical. Oliver didn't need to be confused about what was happening, but part of it was fear. Fear that moving too fast would jinx whatever fragile thing they were building. "We'll figure it out," Ethan said. The words were starting to feel hollow from repetition. Before Vivian could respond, Oliver appeared in the doorway holding his tablet. "Dad, can I play games? You already had screen time this morning." "But I'm bored." "Then go play with your blocks." "I don't want to." Ethan sighed. "Buddy, I said no." Oliver's face scrunched up in that particular way that meant a tantrum was brewing. "That's not fair. You never let me do anything fun anymore." "Oliver." "I hate it here. Everything's different now. I want things to go back to normal." The words hit harder than they should have, because Oliver was right. Nothing was normal, and Ethan had no idea when or if it would be again. Vivian stood up. "Hey, Ollie, what if we bake cookies instead? I bet your dad has everything we need." Oliver hesitated, the tantrum deflating as quickly as it had inflated. "Chocolate chip? Is there any other kind?" The boy considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, crisis averted." Ethan shot Vivian a grateful look as she led Oliver back toward the kitchen, already pulling mixing bowls out of cabinets like she'd lived here for years instead of days. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and felt his stomach drop. Unknown number. "She's good with kids." Sarah would have liked that. His hands went cold. The message sat there on the screen, 8 words that felt like a violation worse than anything Ryan had done so far. Mentioning Sarah. Acting like he knew anything about her. Ethan's vision blurred at the edges. He stood up so fast his chair scraped loud against the floor. "Ethan?" Vivian looked up from where she was measuring flour. "What's wrong?" He held up the phone. Her face went pale as she read the message. "Oh my God. How does he know about Sarah?"
I don't know. Maybe he looked you up online, social media? I'm not on social media. Then he found an obituary, or asked around, or... She stopped, realization dawning. He's trying to get in your head, make you feel like he's everywhere, like he knows everything. It's working.
Ethan was already dialing the police. The same tired-sounding officer from before answered, took down the information, and gave him the same useless advice. "Document everything. Don't engage, they'd add it to the report." "A report," Ethan said after he hung up. "That's all we get. A report. What else can they do? Their job. Arrest him. Make him stop. They can't arrest someone for sending creepy text messages. Why the hell not?" Vivian didn't have an answer. Neither did Ethan. Oliver tugged on Vivian's shirt. "Are we still making cookies?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy, we are." But the lightness from before was gone. They went through the motions, cracking eggs, mixing dough, pressing shapes with the dinosaur-shaped cookie cutter Oliver insisted on using, but the tension hung over everything like a storm cloud. When the cookies were in the oven, Oliver wandered back to his blocks, and Vivian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "We need to do something," she said quietly. "We can't just sit here waiting for him to escalate." "I'm open to suggestions. What if we confront him, face to face? Tell him we're not scared. Except we are scared, and confronting him is exactly what he wants. Then what? We just keep hiding?" "I don't know, Viv." Ethan's voice came out harsher than he meant. "I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to keep everyone safe."
I know. I'm sorry. She broke off, shaking her head. "I hate this. I hate that he's doing this to us, to you and Oliver. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did you. But it's my mess, my ex, my problem." Ethan crossed to her and took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "It's our problem now. You're not doing this alone." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve you. That's the stupidest thing you've ever said."
She laughed, watery and broken, and kissed him. It was brief, desperate, tasting like fear and cookie dough. When they pulled apart, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. He still hadn't said it back, couldn't quite get the words past the guilt that sat like a stone in his chest. But he wanted to. He wanted to say it so badly it hurt. The timer on the oven beeped, saving him from having to respond. That night, after Oliver was in bed, Ethan sat on the porch with a beer he wasn't drinking and his phone in his lap. He stared at Ryan's last message until the words blurred together. His wedding ring felt heavier than usual. He'd thought about taking it off a dozen times over the past week, had even gotten as far as twisting it halfway before stopping. It felt like a betrayal, like admitting Sarah was really gone, like accepting that his life had moved on without her permission. But she was gone, had been for 4 years, and the ring wasn't protecting anyone. It was just a piece of metal he clung to because letting go felt like falling. Ethan pulled the ring off. It came away easily, too easily, like it had been waiting for this moment. He held it in his palm, feeling the weight of it, the smoothness of the gold worn down from years of wear. "I'm sorry," he said to the empty air. "I'm so sorry." The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. He closed his fist around the ring and went inside. The next morning started badly and got worse. Ethan woke up to Oliver screaming. He was out of bed and down the hall before he was fully conscious, his heart slamming against his ribs. Vivian was right behind him, still in her pajamas, eyes wide with panic. Oliver's door was open. The boy was sitting up in bed, sobbing hysterically, pointing at the window. "He was there," Oliver gasped between sobs. "He was looking at me." Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Who was there?" "The man. The bad man. He was standing outside my window." Ethan crossed to the window in 3 strides and yanked the curtain aside. The yard was empty, no one in sight, but Oliver's window was on the 2nd floor. If someone had been looking in, they'd need a ladder. "Stay with him," Ethan told Vivian, then bolted downstairs and out the back door. The grass was wet with dew, the early morning air cold enough to sting his lungs. Ethan rounded the side of the house where Oliver's window was and stopped dead. There were scuff marks in the dirt below the window, fresh ones, and leaning against the side of the house was a ladder. Not his ladder. Ethan kept his locked in the garage. Someone had brought this here. Someone had climbed up to his son's window and looked inside while they were all sleeping. Ethan's vision tunneled. His hands shook. The rage that surged through him was so powerful it nearly knocked him off his feet. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The police came faster this time. 2 patrol cars and a detective in an unmarked sedan who introduced herself as Detective Chen. She was younger than Ethan expected, sharp-eyed and no nonsense, and she took Oliver's statement with a gentleness that made Ethan's throat tight. "Can you describe the man you saw?" Chen asked, crouched down to Oliver's level. "He was big, and he had dark hair, and he was smiling." Smiling? Oliver nodded, his eyes welling up again. It was a scary smile. Chen looked up at Ethan. "Do you have any idea who this might be?" "Yeah, Ryan Westfield. He's been stalking my girlfriend. We've filed multiple reports." "I'll pull those reports. In the meantime, we're going to dust the ladder for prints and check for any other evidence. Do you have security cameras?" "No." "Get some. Today, if possible." After the police left, Ethan stood in the driveway staring at the ladder they'd taken as evidence. His hands were still shaking, not from fear now, from rage. Vivian came outside, wrapped in one of his jackets. "Oliver's watching cartoons. I think he's okay, just scared. He shouldn't have to be scared in his own house." "I know. This ends now." Vivian grabbed his arm. "Ethan, don't. Whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking that the police can't help us, that Ryan's never going to stop unless someone makes him stop." "And what? You're going to be the one to do it? You'll end up in jail, or worse." "I don't care." "Yes, you do. Oliver needs you. I need you. Don't throw that away because Ryan is a psychopath." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to get in his truck and drive to wherever Ryan was and beat him senseless. But Vivian was right. Losing control now wouldn't protect anyone. It would just give Ryan exactly what he wanted. "Fine," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "But we're getting security cameras and an alarm system, and I'm not letting Oliver out of my sight until this is over." Agreed. They spent the rest of the day turning the house into a fortress. Ethan installed cameras at every entrance, motion sensor lights in the yard, and a door alarm that beeped any time someone opened or closed an exterior door. It cost more than he could afford, but he didn't care. By evening, Oliver seemed to have recovered from the morning's terror. He ate dinner, played with his toys, and only asked twice if the bad man was coming back. Each time, Ethan told him no, trying to sound more confident than he felt. After Oliver was asleep, Ethan and Vivian sat on the couch, both too wired to even pretend they might sleep. "We should leave," Vivian said. "I know you said it's not a solution, but maybe it's time." "Where would we go?" "I don't know. Anywhere. My company has an office in Seattle. I could transfer temporarily. You could find work out there. And when we come back, Ryan will still be here. Maybe by then the police will have done something. Maybe he'll have moved on. Or maybe he'll follow us to Seattle." Vivian didn't have a response to that. They sat in silence, the weight of their situation pressing down like a physical thing. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He didn't want to look, didn't want to see what fresh nightmare Ryan had cooked up, but ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. The message wasn't from an unknown number this time. It was from Ryan's actual phone. Like he didn't care anymore about hiding. "Ryan Westfield. Did the kid enjoy his wake-up call? I thought it was time we all got better acquainted. Don't worry. Next time I'll knock." Attached was a photo. Ethan opened it and felt his heart stop. It was a picture of Oliver's room, taken from inside the house. The angle was wrong for the window. This was taken from the doorway, which meant Ryan had been inside, had walked through Ethan's house while they were sleeping, had stood in the hallway outside Oliver's room. "Oh my God," Vivian whispered, looking over his shoulder. "When did he—" "I don't know." Ethan was already on his feet, checking the new security footage on his phone. He scrolled back through the recordings, looking for any sign of an intrusion. Nothing. The cameras showed an empty yard. No one approaching the house, no one leaving, which meant Ryan had been here before the cameras were installed. Maybe last night. Maybe earlier. Ethan's hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the phone. "He was in my house. He was inside with my son sleeping upstairs. We need to call Detective Chen right now. Ethan made the call. Chen answered on the second ring, listened to what he had to say, and promised to send a unit over immediately. In the meantime, she said, is there somewhere else you can stay tonight? Family? Friends? I'm not leaving my house. Mr. Cole, I'm not running, not anymore. He hung up before she could argue. Vivian was pacing now, her arms wrapped tight around herself. This is insane. He broke into your house. He could have hurt Oliver. He could have... She broke off, her face crumpling. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she shook. He's not going to hurt anyone. I won't let him. You can't promise that. Watch me. The police came, dusted for prints, found nothing. Ryan had been careful. He always was. Detective Chen pulled Ethan aside before she left. I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Cole. We don't have enough for an arrest yet. The photo could have been taken any time, and without evidence of forced entry. So what, we just wait for him to actually hurt someone? I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need something concrete. A direct threat, proof of trespassing, something that'll hold up in court. He climbed a ladder to my son's window and broke into my house. I believe you, but Ryan Westfield is smart. He's not leaving evidence behind, which means we need to catch him in the act. And how do we do that? Chen hesitated. There are ways, but they involve putting yourselves at risk, and I can't officially recommend that. Unofficially? Unofficially? She lowered her voice. If he thinks you're vulnerable, he'll get sloppy, make a mistake, and when he does, we'll be ready. Ethan stared at her. You want us to be bait. I want to catch him. This is the fastest way to do it. After Chen left, Ethan stood in the driveway, staring at the dark street, his mind racing. Vivian came outside and stood beside him. What did she say? She wants us to draw him out, make him think he's winning so he gets careless. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Vivian didn't answer. They stood there in the cold, two people who'd been pushed too far and were finally starting to push back. If we do this, Vivian said slowly, we do it smart. We don't give him a chance to hurt anyone. We set the trap and we make sure he walks right into it. Ethan looked at her. You're serious. I'm tired of being a victim, aren't you? He was. More than tired. He was furious. And for the first time since this nightmare started, he felt like they had a plan. It took 2 days to set everything up. Ethan called a security company and had them install additional cameras, hidden ones this time, positioned where Ryan wouldn't see them. He also got a panic button that connected directly to the police station. Vivian posted on social media her first post in months, mentioning that she was staying with friends for a few days. A lie designed to make Ryan think she'd left Ethan's house unprotected. Detective Chen stationed an unmarked car 2 blocks away with 2 officers inside, ready to respond the moment they got a signal. And then they waited. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, the motion sensors went off at 2 in the morning, but it turned out to be a raccoon. By the third night, Ethan was starting to think Ryan had figured it out, that he was too smart to fall for the trap. But then, at 3 in the morning, one of the hidden cameras picked up movement. A figure in dark clothes, moving through the backyard toward the house. Ethan's phone buzzed with the alert. He was already awake, sitting on the couch with the baseball bat across his knees. Vivian was upstairs with Oliver, both of them locked in the boys' room with instructions not to come out no matter what. Ethan watched the camera feed as the figure approached the back door, tried the handle, found it locked. Then the figure pulled something from their pocket, a lockpick set, and got to work. Ethan hit the panic button. Then he stood up, gripped the bat tighter, and waited. The door opened slowly, quietly. Ryan stepped inside, and in the dim light from the street, Ethan could see his face. He was smiling, that same cruel smile Oliver had described. Didn't think I'd actually do it, did you? Ryan said, his voice low and mocking. Thought you could scare me off with a few cameras and some cops? Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, bat in hand, letting Ryan see him. Ryan's smile widened. What are you going to do, Ethan? Hit me? Go ahead. I'll make sure everyone knows you attacked me in your own house. Self-defense won't mean shit when I'm the one bleeding. I'm not going to hit you. No? Ryan took a step closer. Then what's the bat for? Insurance. Ryan laughed. You're pathetic. You know that? Hiding behind cops and cameras because you're too weak to handle this yourself. Vivian deserves better than you. She deserves someone who... He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes going wide. Red and blue lights flooded the yard. Sirens screamed to life. The front door burst open and 4 officers swarmed in with guns drawn. Please, hands up! Ryan spun toward the door, then back to Ethan, realization dawning on his face. You set me up. Yeah, Ethan said. I did. Ryan lunged. He was fast, but not fast enough. 2 officers tackled him before he got within 5 feet of Ethan, slamming him face first onto the floor. Ryan fought back, screaming obscenities, but they had him cuffed within seconds. Detective Chen walked in behind them, looking almost satisfied. Ryan Westfield, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, stalking, criminal trespass, and attempted assault. You have the right to remain silent. Ethan stopped listening. The bat slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. It was over. Ryan was still screaming as they dragged him out of the house. Not threats anymore, just incoherent rage, the kind that came from someone who'd finally lost control of the situation he'd spent weeks orchestrating. The sound echoed down the street, waking neighbors, sending porch lights flickering on one by one. Ethan stood in his living room watching through the window as they shoved Ryan into the back of a patrol car. His hands were shaking. Not from fear this time, from the sudden absence of it. The adrenaline that had been keeping him upright for the past 2 weeks was draining away, leaving him hollow and exhausted. Detective Chen approached, tucking her notepad into her jacket. You did good, Mr. Cole. We got everything on camera. Breaking and entering, trespassing with a weapon. He had a knife on him, by the way. Add that to the stalking charges and the previous harassment, and he's looking at serious time. A knife, Ethan repeated. The word felt distant, unreal. Yeah, we'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement, both you and Ms. Brooks. But for tonight, you're safe. He's not making bail on these charges. Ethan nodded, but he wasn't really listening anymore. All he could think about was getting upstairs to Oliver and Vivian, making sure they were okay, making sure this was really over. Chen left with the last of the officers, and the house fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of sirens fading down the street. Ethan climbed the stairs slowly, his legs heavy. Oliver's door was still locked. He knocked softly. Viv, it's me. It's over. The lock clicked and the door opened. Vivian stood there with Oliver pressed against her side, the boy's face buried in her shirt. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, but she was the most beautiful thing Ethan had ever seen. Is he gone? She whispered. He's gone. They arrested him. It's over. Vivian's face crumpled and she started crying, not the quiet, controlled tears she'd been holding back for weeks, but full gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Ethan crossed the room and pulled both her and Oliver into his arms, holding them tight while Vivian fell apart. Oliver looked up at Ethan, his eyes wide and scared. Is the bad man in jail now? Yeah, buddy, he is. Is he going to come back? No, he's not coming back. Oliver considered this for a moment, then nodded solemnly, like he was trying to be brave. Okay, can I go back to sleep now? The question was so innocent, so perfectly childlike, that Ethan almost laughed. Yeah, you can go back to sleep. He tucked Oliver into bed, pulled the blankets up to his chin, and sat on the edge of the mattress until the boy's breathing evened out. When he finally stood to leave, Vivian was waiting in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself. I can't believe it's really over, she said. Me neither. They went downstairs together. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. Ethan locked the back door, reset the alarm, and then stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker like he'd forgotten how to use it. You should sleep, Vivian said. So should you. I don't think I can. Ethan turned to face her. She looked fragile, standing there in his old t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair a mess, her face bare. But there was something else there too. Something stronger. She'd survived this. They both had. Come here, he said. She crossed to him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. They stood like that for a long time, not speaking, just breathing together. Thank you, Vivian said finally, her voice muffled against his chest. For what? For not giving up. For protecting us. For... She pulled back to look at him. For choosing me. Ethan's throat tightened. I didn't choose you. I just stopped pretending I hadn't already chosen you a long time ago. When? I don't know. Maybe the first time you showed up with takeout and didn't ask me how I was doing. Maybe the time you taught Oliver how to tie his shoes because I kept screwing it up. Maybe... Vivian kissed him. It was different from the other times. Not desperate or afraid, just sure. Like she'd been waiting her whole life to kiss him exactly like this, in this kitchen, at 3 a.m, after the worst was finally behind them. When they pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I love you. The words came easier than he'd expected, like they'd been sitting there waiting for permission. Vivian smiled, tears streaming down her face. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Vivian Brooks. I'm completely in love with you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. She laughed, the sound wet and breathless. Worth the wait. They ended up on the couch, tangled together under a blanket, talking in quiet voices about everything and nothing until the sky outside started turning gray with dawn. Ethan told her about the first time he'd realized he was falling for her, 2 years ago, when she'd shown up on his birthday with a cake she'd baked herself that was lopsided and slightly burned, and he'd thought it was the sweetest thing anyone had ever done for him. Vivian told him about the moment she'd known she loved him, watching him read bedtime stories to Oliver with all the character voices, making his son laugh so hard he couldn't breathe. I kept thinking that's the kind of man I want, she said. The kind who shows up even when it's hard. The kind who loves so completely it changes everything around him. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just kissed her again. Somewhere around 6 a.m, they both fell asleep on the couch, still wrapped around each other, exhausted and relieved and finally safe. The next few days passed in a strange blur. There were statements to give at the police station, paperwork to sign, and phone calls from Detective Chen updating them on Ryan's charges. The knife he'd been carrying pushed everything into felony territory. Combined with the breaking and entering, the stalking evidence, and the dozens of threatening messages they'd documented, the prosecutor was confident they could keep him locked up for years. He'll probably take the plea deal, Chen explained over the phone. His lawyer's already floating the idea. 5 to 7 years, eligible for parole after 3 if he behaves. 3 years, Ethan repeated. It sounded like both forever and not nearly long enough. I know it's not perfect, but it's better than a trial that could go either way. And with a restraining order in place, he won't be able to contact either of you when he gets out. After he hung up, Ethan sat at the kitchen table staring at his coffee. 3 years. Enough time for Oliver to forget what Ryan looked like. Enough time to build a life that felt normal again. Maybe. Vivian came downstairs dressed for work, the first time she'd left the house in over a week. She looked nervous, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror 3 times before picking up her keys. You sure you're ready for this? Ethan asked. No, but I can't hide forever. You're not hiding, you're recovering. Same difference. She turned to face him. Come with me, just for the drive. I don't think I can do it alone yet. So Ethan loaded Oliver into the truck, and they followed Vivian's car across town to the glass and steel building where she worked. The parking lot was half empty this early, and Vivian sat in her car for a full minute before finally getting out. Ethan rolled down his window. You've got this. Do I? Yeah, you do. She smiled, but it was shaky. I'll text you when I'm done. Maybe we can get lunch? Sounds good. Ethan watched her walk toward the building, shoulders squared, head up, looking every inch the confident CEO she'd been before Ryan had tried to tear her down. He felt a surge of pride so strong it made his chest ache. Oliver leaned forward from the back seat. Is Miss Vivian scared? A little bit, yeah. Why? Because she's been through something hard, and it takes time to feel normal again. Oliver thought about this. When Mom died, I was scared for a long time. The words hit Ethan like a punch. He turned to look at his son. You were? Yeah. I thought maybe you would die too, or that I'd wake up one day and you'd be gone. Ethan's throat closed up. Buddy, I'm not going anywhere, I promise. I know, but I still get scared sometimes. That's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. Oliver nodded seriously, like this was important information he needed to file away. Then, in the way only kids could, he changed the subject completely. Can we get donuts for breakfast? Ethan laughed despite himself. Yeah, we can get donuts. They spent the morning at the park, then picked up lunch and brought it back to the house. Vivian texted around noon saying she'd made it through her meetings without falling apart, which she considered a win. Ethan responded with a string of encouraging emojis that made her send back a laughing face. It felt almost normal. Not quite. There was still a weight in Ethan's chest that wouldn't lift. Still a hyper-awareness every time he heard a car door slam or footsteps on the sidewalk. But it was better. Better than the constant terror of the past 2 weeks. Better than the hollow grief of the past 4 years. That night, after Oliver was in bed, Vivian stayed. Not in the guest room this time. In Ethan's room, in his bed, curled up against his side like she belonged there. Is this okay? She asked, her voice small in the darkness. More than okay. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for Ryan to show up somehow, or for you to change your mind about us. I'm not changing my mind. How do you know? Because I've spent 4 years hiding from this, and I'm done hiding. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Do you think Sarah would have liked me? The question caught Ethan off guard. Yeah, I do. Really? Really? She would have liked how you take your coffee black because you're too impatient to wait for it to cool. She would have liked how you sing off-key in the car. She would have liked how you make Oliver laugh. He paused. She would have liked that you make me happy. I want to make you happy. You do. Even with all the baggage I brought into your life? Viv, we've all got baggage. Mine's just been buried in a cemetery for 4 years. She laughed softly, then turned her face into his shoulder. I'm glad you're not hiding anymore. Me too. They fell asleep like that, and for the first time in longer than Ethan could remember, he didn't dream about Sarah. He didn't dream about anything at all. The weeks that followed were an exercise in rebuilding. Small things at first. Vivian officially moved her stuff into Ethan's house, turning the guest room into a home office. Oliver started calling her by her first name without the miss in front of it, which somehow felt significant. Ethan went back to work, taking on jobs he'd been putting off, trying to catch up on the income he'd lost. Ryan's plea deal went through exactly as Detective Chen had predicted. 7 years, eligible for parole after 4. The restraining order was permanent. Ethan and Vivian attended the sentencing, sitting in the back of the courtroom while Ryan stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, his face blank. Ryan didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge them at all. And when the judge asked if he had anything to say, he just shook his head. Afterward, in the courthouse parking lot, Vivian broke down crying. Not from fear this time, from relief. It's really over, she said between sobs. It's really, actually over. Ethan held her while she cried, watching the clouds move across the sky, and felt something inside him finally let go. But healing wasn't a straight line. There were bad days mixed in with the good ones. Days when Vivian would wake up from nightmares about Ryan standing outside her window. Days when Oliver would ask unprompted if the bad man was ever coming back. Days when Ethan would catch himself checking the locks 3 times before bed, just to be sure. It was Vivian who suggested therapy. First for Oliver, who'd started having separation anxiety whenever Ethan left the house. Then for herself. And eventually, reluctantly, for Ethan too. I don't need therapy, he'd said when she first brought it up. Neither do I, but I'm going anyway. Why? Because I want to be better than okay, and I think you do too. So Ethan went. Once a week, sitting in an office that smelled like lavender and old books, talking to a woman named Dr. Reyes about grief and guilt and what it meant to move forward without forgetting. It was harder than he'd expected. The first few sessions, he mostly just sat there in silence, arms crossed, waiting for the hour to be up. But Dr. Reyes was patient. She didn't push, just asked questions and let him sit with the discomfort of not having answers. Tell me about Sarah, she said one day. Ethan bristled. Why? Because you've spent 4 years acting like loving someone new means betraying her. I want to know why you think that. I don't think that. Don't you? He was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, she was supposed to grow old with me. We had plans, a whole life mapped out. And then she was just Gone. And I couldn't save her. I couldn't do anything. So yeah, part of me feels like I failed her. And moving on, being happy, feels like I'm saying she didn't matter. Did she matter? Of course she did. Then how does being happy now erase that? Ethan didn't have an answer. Dr. Reyes leaned forward. Grief isn't loyalty, Ethan. Grief is what happens when you lose something you loved. But staying stuck in it forever doesn't honor her memory. Living does. Being present for your son does. Letting yourself love again does. The words settled over him like a blanket. Uncomfortable. Necessary. I'm trying, he said quietly. I know, and that's enough. At home, things continued to shift. Vivian started cooking dinner most nights, experimenting with recipes she found online that were almost always disasters. Oliver thought it was hilarious, and even Ethan had to admit that burned lasagna tasted better when it came with laughter. One night, about 2 months after Ryan's sentencing, Oliver looked up from his plate of overcooked chicken and said, Vivian, are you going to be my new mom? The room went silent. Vivian's fork clattered against her plate. Ethan froze halfway through a bite. Oliver looked between them, confused. What? Did I say something wrong? No, buddy, Ethan said carefully. You didn't say anything wrong. Then why do you both look weird? Vivian recovered first. She set down her fork and leaned toward Oliver. That's a big question, Ollie. Can I ask you something first? Okay. How would you feel if I was? Oliver shrugged. I don't know. Good, I guess. You're here all the time anyway. And you're nice. And you make Dad smile more. I do? Yeah, he used to be sad a lot. But now he's happy. Ethan's chest tightened. He'd thought he'd been hiding it better than that. Thought Oliver was too young to notice. But kids saw everything. Vivian's eyes were shining. Well, I'm not your mom. Nobody's going to replace her. But if you want, I could be something else. Something just as important. Like what? I don't know yet. We'll figure it out together. Is that okay? Oliver thought about it, then nodded. Okay. Can I have more chicken? Just like that, the moment passed. But Ethan caught Vivian's eye across the table, and they both smiled. Later that night, after Oliver was asleep, they sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, listening to the crickets. That was intense, Vivian said. Yeah. Do you think he's okay with it, with me being here? I think he's more than okay with it. I think he loves you. Vivian's breath caught. Don't make me cry. I just fixed my makeup. You're not wearing makeup. Exactly. I can't afford to cry anymore today. Ethan laughed and pulled her closer. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just existing together in the quiet. Ethan, Vivian said eventually, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you still wear your ring? He looked down at his left hand. The ring had been gone for weeks now, tucked away in a drawer upstairs along with Sarah's wedding band and a few other keepsakes. But he still caught himself twisting the bare spot where it used to sit, like his body hadn't fully accepted its absence. No, he said. I took it off the night Ryan was arrested. Do you regret it? No, but it's still weird, like I forgot how to be a person without it. You didn't forget. You're just learning how to be a different version of yourself. Is that what you're doing too? Vivian nodded. Yeah. The version of me before Ryan was confident, maybe too confident. She didn't see red flags because she thought she could handle anything. The version of me during Ryan was small, scared, convinced she deserved it somehow. She paused. I'm trying to figure out who I am after him. Someone in between, maybe. Strong, but careful. Hopeful, but realistic. I like all your versions. She smiled. Even the one who burns dinner? Especially that one. They stayed outside until the wine was gone and the stars were bright overhead. And when they finally went inside, Ethan locked the door behind them without checking it twice. Progress. 3 months after the arrest, Detective Chen called with an update. Ryan's lawyers were pushing for an early parole hearing, claiming he'd been a model prisoner and was undergoing therapy. It won't go anywhere, Chen assured them. Not this early, but I wanted you to know so you're not blindsided. Ethan thanked her and hung up. He told Vivian over dinner, keeping his voice calm for Oliver's sake. He's never going to stop, Vivian said quietly after Oliver went to play. Even in prison, he's still trying to control things. Let him try. He's behind bars. We're not. For now. Viv.
I'm sorry. I know I'm supposed to be over this. I know I'm supposed to feel safe now. But every time I hear his name, She stopped, shaking her head. I'm working on it. I promise. You don't have to apologize for being scared. He terrorized you. That doesn't go away just because he's locked up. I just want to stop feeling like this, like he still has power over me.
Ethan took her hand. Then we take the power back. We build the life we want. We get married. We raise Oliver. We prove that he didn't win. Vivian looked up sharply. What did you just say? Ethan's heart skipped. He hadn't planned to say it. The words had just come out. But now that they were hanging in the air between them, he realized he meant them. I said, we get married. Ethan, not now, not tomorrow, but someday. When we're ready. When it feels right. He squeezed her hand. I want to marry you, Vivian. I want to build a life with you. I want Oliver to grow up knowing that love doesn't end when things get hard, that it gets stronger. Vivian was crying now, full tears streaming down her face. Are you serious? Completely. We've only been together for 3 months. I've known you for 6 years. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? She laughed through her tears. You're insane. Maybe. But I'm also right. Vivian stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for doubt. She wouldn't find any, because Ethan had never been more sure of anything in his life. Okay, she said finally. Okay? Okay. Someday. When we're ready. Ask me again. I will. And he meant it. 6 months later, the house no longer felt like a place Ethan was just surviving in. It felt like a home. Small changes had accumulated into something bigger. Vivian's coffee mug sat next to his on the counter every morning. Oliver's drawings covered the refrigerator, half of them featuring stick figures labeled Dad, Vivian, and Me in crayon. The guest room had become an office filled with Vivian's work files and a desk she'd bought herself, claiming she needed a space that was hers, even though Ethan had told her 100 times that everything here was already hers. The nightmares came less frequently now. Vivian still had bad nights where she'd wake up gasping, convinced she'd heard footsteps in the hall, but Ethan would hold her until her breathing evened out and she remembered where she was. Safe. With him. Away from everything Ryan had tried to destroy. Oliver had stopped asking if the bad man was coming back. His therapist said that was progress, that kids were resilient in ways adults forgot to be. Ethan wasn't sure he believed that entirely. He saw the way Oliver still checked the locks before bed sometimes, mimicking what he'd watched his father do for weeks. But the boy was laughing more, playing more, being 7 again instead of a kid who'd seen too much too soon. On a Saturday morning in early fall, Ethan woke up to the smell of something burning. He jerked upright, momentarily disoriented, then heard Vivian cursing in the kitchen and Oliver's high-pitched giggling. He smiled despite himself and pulled on sweatpants before heading downstairs. Vivian stood at the stove waving a dish towel at the smoke detector while Oliver sat at the counter eating cereal, clearly having given up on whatever breakfast experiment she'd attempted. I thought I had it this time, Vivian said when she saw Ethan. The recipe said medium heat. I used medium heat. Your version of medium heat could cook asphalt, Ethan said, kissing her temple. What were you trying to make? French toast. Apparently that was ambitious. Apparently, Oliver held up his cereal box. Want some, Dad? Sure, buddy. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, the burned French toast scraped into the trash, and talked about nothing important. Oliver wanted to go to the park. Vivian had reports to finish. Ethan needed to swing by a job site and check on the crew he'd hired for a renovation project. Normal things. Boring things. The kind of things that used to feel empty, but now felt like exactly enough. After breakfast, Ethan drove Oliver to the park, while Vivian stayed home to work. The boy ran straight for the swings, and Ethan pushed him higher and higher until Oliver was screaming with laughter, his hair whipping in the wind. Higher, Dad, higher! You're going to launch into space. Good, I want to see the moon. Ethan laughed and gave him one more big push. Watching his son fly through the air, fearless and happy, made something settle in Ethan's chest. This was what mattered, not the fear they'd lived through, not the trauma Ryan had inflicted. These moments of pure, uncomplicated joy. When Oliver finally tired himself out, they sat on a bench sharing a bag of goldfish crackers Ethan had found in the truck. "Dad?" Oliver said around a mouthful of crackers. "Yeah, buddy? Are you going to marry Vivian?" Ethan paused mid-chew. "Why do you ask?" "Because Tommy at school said his dad got married to someone who's not his mom, and now Tommy has 2 houses. Will I have 2 houses?" "No, Vivian already lives with us, remember?" "Oh, right." Oliver thought about this. "So are you going to marry her? Would that be okay with you?" Oliver shrugged. "I guess. She's nice and she's funny when she burns stuff." "She is pretty funny, and she doesn't get mad when I'm loud." "That's true. And she knows all the dinosaur names, even the hard ones." Ethan smiled. "So you'd be okay if I married her?" Oliver nodded seriously. "Yeah, but you should get her a big ring. Tommy's dad got a big ring, and his new mom really liked it." "I'll keep that in mind." They finished their goldfish in comfortable silence, and Ethan realized that his son had already accepted Vivian as part of their family in a way that was simple and uncomplicated. Kids didn't carry the same baggage adults did. They just loved who loved them back. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a beer he wasn't drinking and his phone in his hand. He'd been thinking about this for weeks. Longer, maybe. But tonight felt like the right time. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. His finger hovered over it for a moment before he pressed call. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Ethan, is everything okay?" "Yeah, Mom, everything's fine." His mother had called more in the past 6 months than she had in the previous 4 years. Once she'd learned about Ryan and the arrest, she'd driven down from 2 states away and stayed for a week, cooking meals and playing with Oliver and pointedly not asking Ethan about Vivian until he brought her up first. When he finally did, his mother had just smiled and said, "About time." "What's going on?" she asked now. "You never call this late." "I need to ask you something." "Okay." Ethan took a breath. "Do you still have Sarah's ring? The one I gave back to you after—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. His mother knew what he meant. After Sarah died, he'd returned her engagement ring to his mother for safekeeping, unable to look at it without falling apart. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I do. It's in my jewelry box." "Why?" "I want to give it to Vivian." Another pause, longer this time. "Ethan, I know what you're going to say, but I'm not trying to replace Sarah. I'm not pretending she didn't exist. He stopped, searching for the right words. "Vivian's it for me, Mom, and I want to do this right. But I can't afford a new ring right now, and even if I could, it wouldn't feel right. Sarah's ring is part of our family, and I think Sarah would want it to keep being part of our family, with someone who loves Oliver as much as she did." His mother was quiet for so long Ethan thought the call might have dropped. Then she said, voice thick, "She would have loved Vivian." "I know. And she would have wanted you to be happy." "I know that too." "Then I'll mail it tomorrow. Should be there by Thursday." "Thanks, Mom." "Ethan, one more thing." "Yeah?" "I'm proud of you. You know that, right? For everything. For surviving. For letting yourself love again. For being the kind of father Oliver deserves." Ethan's throat tightened. "I'm trying." "You're doing more than trying. You're succeeding." After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, thinking about the past and the future and how they'd somehow become the same thing. Sarah's ring would go to Vivian. The woman he'd lost would help him hold on to the woman he'd found. There was poetry in that. Painful, beautiful poetry. Vivian appeared in the doorway wearing one of his t-shirts and sleep shorts. "You okay? You've been down here forever." "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how lucky I am." She crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders from behind, resting her chin on top of his head. "We're both lucky." "You think?" "I know. I could have stayed stuck with Ryan. Or alone. Instead, I got you and Oliver and terrible burnt breakfasts. That's pretty damn lucky." Ethan laughed and pulled her around to sit in his lap. She curled into him like she belonged there, which she did. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." They stayed like that until Ethan's legs started falling asleep, and Vivian declared she was going to bed whether he came with her or not. He followed her upstairs, and they fell asleep tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand in her hair. The ring arrived on Thursday in a small padded envelope. Ethan waited until Vivian left for work and Oliver was at school before opening it. The engagement ring was exactly as he remembered. Simple, elegant, a single round diamond on a gold band. Sarah had picked it out herself, insisting she didn't want anything flashy, just something that meant something. And it had. It still did. Ethan held it up to the light and felt the weight of everything it represented. His first marriage, his first love, the life he'd thought he'd have forever, but also possibility, the chance to build something new without erasing what came before. He tucked the ring into his sock drawer beneath a pile of winter socks he wouldn't need for months and tried to figure out when and how to ask the question. The answer came 2 weeks later, almost by accident. Vivian had mentioned wanting to try that restaurant again, the one where everything had fallen apart at her birthday dinner. She'd said it casually, like it didn't matter, but Ethan could tell it did. She wanted to reclaim that space, turn a bad memory into a new one. So he made a reservation, called Vivian's assistant, and had her clear Vivian's schedule for the evening without telling her why. Arranged for Oliver to stay with the neighbor who'd become something like a grandmother figure over the past year. And on a Friday night in late October, he told Vivian to get dressed up because they were going out. Going where? She asked, suspicious. You'll see. Ethan, trust me. She did. Because that was who they'd become. Two people who trusted each other even when the future was uncertain. They drove to the restaurant in comfortable silence, Vivian's hand resting on Ethan's thigh, his hand covering hers. When they pulled into the parking lot and she saw where they were, her eyes went wide. Ethan, we don't have to. I want to. Don't you? She nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. Inside, the restaurant was exactly as Ethan remembered. Too bright, too loud. But this time it didn't feel threatening. It just felt like a place where things had once gone wrong and could now go right. They were seated at a different table, smaller, more private, tucked in a corner away from the noise. The waiter brought water and menus, and Vivian stared at hers without reading it. You okay? Ethan asked. I'm remembering. Me too. It feels different now. Good different or bad different? Good. Definitely good. They ordered food they wouldn't eat much of, too nervous and too full of whatever unspoken thing was happening between them. Ethan kept reaching into his pocket to touch the ring box, making sure it was still there, working up the courage to do what he'd come here to do. Halfway through dinner, Vivian reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you for this, for bringing me back here. I needed it. You needed to stare at a plate of pasta you're not eating? She laughed. I needed to prove to myself that this place doesn't have power over me anymore. That night, Marcus, Ryan, everything, it almost broke me. But I'm still here, we're still here, and that matters. It does. I'm serious, Ethan. I spent so long feeling like a victim, like Ryan took something from me I could never get back. But he didn't. I'm still me. Just a different version, stronger maybe, or at least more careful. You were always strong. Maybe. But I didn't always believe it. Ethan's heart was pounding now. This was it. This was the moment. He stood up. Vivian looked confused. Where are you going? Nowhere. He dropped to one knee. The restaurant around them seemed to quiet, though that might have been his imagination. Vivian's eyes went wide, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan, let me say this before I lose my nerve. He pulled the ring box from his pocket and opened it. I've spent the last 4 years convinced that loving someone new meant betraying the woman I lost. But you taught me that's not how love works. Love doesn't run out. It doesn't get used up. It just grows. And I love you, Vivian Brooks. I love how you burn breakfast and sing off key and make my son laugh. I love how you're brave even when you're terrified. I love how you didn't give up on me when I was too broken to see what was right in front of me. Vivian was crying now, tears streaming down her face. This ring belonged to Sarah, Ethan continued. And before you say anything, I asked my mom if it was okay. I asked her if Sarah would have wanted this. And you know what she said? She said Sarah would have wanted me to be happy. She would have wanted Oliver to grow up in a house full of love. And she would have wanted this ring to stay in our family with someone who loves us as much as she did. He paused, his voice breaking. Will you marry me? For a moment, Vivian didn't move, just stared at him with those wide, tear-filled eyes. Then she slid out of her chair, dropped to her knees in front of him, and kissed him hard enough that he forgot they were in public. When she pulled back, she was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, you idiot. Of course, yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Around them, the restaurant erupted into applause. Strangers cheering for two people they didn't know, celebrating a moment that had been years in the making. Ethan pulled Vivian to her feet, holding her close, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt complete. Not because Vivian filled some hole Sarah had left behind, but because she'd helped him realize the hole didn't need filling. It just needed acknowledging. Loving Sarah and loving Vivian weren't mutually exclusive. They were two chapters in the same story, and both mattered. They left the restaurant without finishing their food, too overwhelmed and too happy to care. In the parking lot, Vivian kept staring at her hand, turning it this way and that to watch the diamond catch the light. I can't believe you gave me Sarah's ring, she said softly. Do you mind? Mind? Ethan, it's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever done for me. It means you're not choosing between us. You're choosing all of it, the past and the future, the grief and the hope. That's... She broke off, shaking her head. That's everything. You're everything. She kissed him again, slower this time, and whispered against his lips. Let's go home. They picked up Oliver on the way back. The boy took one look at Vivian's hand and said, Is that the big ring? Ethan laughed. Yeah, buddy, that's the big ring. Does this mean you're getting married? It does. Oliver considered this, then nodded approvingly. Good. Tommy's going to be so jealous. At home, they told Oliver he could stay up late to celebrate. They made popcorn and watched a movie he'd seen a dozen times, and halfway through, Oliver fell asleep between them on the couch. Ethan looked down at his son, then at Vivian, who was already drifting off herself, and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked him over. This was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. Messy and complicated and beautiful. Vivian stirred, opened one eye. What are you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. That's helpful. I'm thinking about how I almost missed this. How I almost stayed stuck in the past because I was too scared to let go. But you didn't. But I didn't. And here we are. Here we are. Vivian closed her eyes again, snuggling deeper into the couch. I love you, Ethan Cole. Even if you do overthink everything. I love you too. They fell asleep like that, the three of them tangled together, a family built from grief and hope, and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. The wedding happened 4 months later on a cold February morning in Ethan's backyard. It was small, just family and a handful of close friends, because neither of them wanted anything big, just something meaningful. Oliver served as ring bearer and took his job so seriously he practiced walking down the makeshift aisle for an hour the night before. Vivian wore a simple white dress she'd found at a boutique downtown, and Ethan wore the only suit he owned, the one he'd bought for Sarah's funeral and hadn't worn since. Ethan's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Vivian's parents, who'd flown in from across the country, kept squeezing each other's hands like they couldn't believe their daughter had found someone who loved her this completely after everything she'd been through. The officiant was a friend of Vivian's from college, who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this. She kept the ceremony short and sweet, focusing on what marriage actually meant. Not perfection, but partnership. Not the absence of hardship, but the commitment to face it together. When it came time for vows, Ethan's hands shook so badly he almost dropped the paper he'd written them on. Vivian, he started, his voice rough. 4 years ago, I was convinced my life was over, that I'd had my shot at happiness and lost it, and the best I could do was survive. But you didn't let me survive. You pushed me to live, to feel, to let myself be broken and heal at the same time. You loved me when I didn't deserve it. You loved Oliver when you didn't have to. And you taught me that moving forward isn't betrayal, it's bravery. He paused, swallowing hard. I promise to be brave with you, for the rest of my life. Vivian was already crying by the time he finished. When it was her turn, she didn't pull out any paper, just looked at him with those eyes that had seen him at his worst and loved him anyway. Ethan, when I met you, I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought it was supposed to be easy, romantic, like the movies. But you taught me that real love is harder than that. It's choosing someone even when it's scary. It's standing beside them when everything falls apart. It's building something new from the pieces of what was broken. She reached up and wiped her eyes. You and Oliver gave me a family when I thought I'd lost my chance at one, and I promised to honor that. To be the kind of partner who shows up, who fights, who loves you both even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. They exchanged rings. Sarah's ring stayed on Vivian's finger, and Ethan wore a new simple gold band that Vivian had picked out. And when the officiant told Ethan he could kiss his bride, he did, long and slow, while Oliver made exaggerated gagging noises that made everyone laugh. The reception was in the house, potluck style, everyone contributing something. Ethan's mother had made her famous lasagna. Vivian's dad brought wine. The neighbor who'd watched Oliver 100 times brought a cake she had decorated herself with slightly crooked frosting that said, "Congrats" in blue letters. They ate and drank and told stories, and at some point, Oliver tugged on Ethan's sleeve and said, "Dad, can I tell everyone something?" "Sure, buddy." Oliver climbed onto a chair so everyone could see him and announced very seriously, "I'm glad my dad married Vivian because now I have two parents again, and also she said I can get a dog." The room erupted in laughter, and Vivian buried her face in her hands. "I said we'd talk about it. But you said maybe." "Maybe is not a yes. But it's not a no either." Ethan wrapped an arm around Vivian's waist and kissed her temple. "Looks like we're getting a dog." "You're both going to be the death of me," she said, but she was smiling. Later, after most of the guests had left and Oliver was asleep upstairs and the house was quiet, Ethan and Vivian stood in the kitchen washing dishes together. "Today was perfect," Vivian said. "You think?" "I know. It was exactly what I needed. What we needed." Ethan dried a plate and set it in the cabinet. "I was thinking about something earlier." "What?" "About how we almost didn't make it here. How Ryan could have won. How I could have stayed stuck. How everything could have gone wrong. But it didn't. But it didn't. And I think that matters. I think the fact that we're standing here, married, happy, that's the whole point. We survived, and we didn't just survive. We built something better than what we had before." Vivian turned off the water and faced him. "Do you ever think about what Sarah would say if she could see us now?" Ethan had thought about it. A lot. "Yeah, I think she'd be happy. I think she'd tell me to stop overthinking and just enjoy it. And I think she'd like you. Really like you." "I hope so." "I know so." They finished the dishes in comfortable silence, then went upstairs and climbed into bed. Vivian curled into Ethan's side, her head on his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her like he'd done 100 times before. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not giving up. On us. On yourself. On all of it. Thank you for not letting me. We make a good team. The best." And it was true. They weren't perfect. They still had bad days, days when the past crept in uninvited and reminded them of everything they'd survived. But they had each other, and they had Oliver, and they had a future that was theirs to build however they wanted. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Grief didn't disappear. Ethan still thought about Sarah, still missed her, still had moments where the loss hit him fresh and sharp. But he'd learned that grief and joy could coexist, that you could mourn what you'd lost while celebrating what you'd found, that moving forward wasn't about forgetting. It was about carrying the past with you while refusing to let it define your future. Vivian had her own ghosts, moments when she'd tense up at a sudden noise or check over her shoulder in parking lots. Ryan was locked away, but the fear he'd instilled didn't vanish overnight. Recovery was slow, messy, non-linear. But she was trying. They both were. And Oliver was just a kid growing up in a house full of love. He'd lost his mother too young. He'd been scared by things no 7-year-old should have to face. But he was resilient in the way kids are, bouncing back faster than adults, finding joy in small things like dinosaur toys and burnt pancakes and the promise of maybe getting a dog someday. The three of them were a family, not a perfect one, not one without pain or history or complications, but a real one, built on choice and commitment and the stubborn belief that people could heal if they just gave themselves permission to try. As Ethan drifted off to sleep that night, his wife in his arms and his son safe down the hall, he thought about everything it had taken to get here. The grief, the fear, the almost losing everything. And he realized that all of it, every terrible, beautiful moment, had been necessary. Because love wasn't something you found once and held on to forever unchanged. Love was something you chose, every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And Ethan had chosen to let go of the past without forgetting it, chosen to love again even when it terrified him, chosen to build a life that honored where he'd been while embracing where he was going. That was the lesson. That was the point. Not that happy endings were guaranteed or that love conquered all or any of the other pretty lies people told themselves, just that moving forward was possible, that healing was possible, that you could lose everything and still find something worth holding on to. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, what you found was even better than what you'd lost. Not because it replaced it, but because it reminded you that the heart was bigger than you thought, big enough to hold grief and joy at the same time. Big enough to love more than once, big enough to keep going even when you thought you were done. Ethan Cole had been stuck for 4 years. A widower, a single father, a man frozen in time by loss. But he wasn't stuck anymore. He was free. And this time, he wasn't facing the future alone.